Things can get messy in life, including divorce. And today we're going to talk about what happens if you go through a divorce during the middle of a transaction and some other facets to that. So stay tuned to this episode of The Den. The Den, powered by the Lyons Group, a show dedicated to exploring hot topics in real estate, local happenings, and industry trends. We're a small team of professionals approaching $400 million in sales and nearly 2,000 local transactions. You're listening to time-tested experts and industry leaders. Here's a refreshing look at real estate happenings and more. Welcome to The Den. Hello and welcome to this episode of The Den. My name is Ben Lyons, and today we're going to be talking about divorce and real estate. I know it's kind of an ugly topic, but we need to address it because it happens. It's part of life. What do they say? You know, divorce, death, and taxes all happen in life at some point, and hopefully it's not the divorce. But before I get into this topic, let me introduce my friends, my partners, my co-hosts. To my left, Paul Hemme, the Rockberry, Aspen, the Ninja Groen, and the boss, Shannon Martinez. My name is Ben, winging it Lyons, today winging it. And welcome to this episode of The Den. I do want to say that death and taxes happen in life, but hopefully it's not a divorce, but it does. I mean, life just happens sometimes. And we've seen many examples of life happening in the middle of transactions or leading up to transactions. We've seen curveballs come in where people say, hey, by the way, we've got this situation going on, and it can get messy, it can get a little bit ugly. And so I know this is a topic that may be sensitive to some people, but I think it needs to be addressed because ultimately power can help you with knowledge, right? If you have knowledge, you got power to some degree. So let's talk about that today. Over the years, we've experienced situations where people have gone through divorces, and it can be messy and can convolute the closing. Shannon, why don't you kick us off today? I love throwing the curveballs. If you're in a situation, you're a married couple, and you're going through a divorce, you have a property, and you're trying to sell that, what are some of the things you should be thinking about as a party to that property?
My first bit of advice would be don't use this as a tool to get to the other one.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times I think people want to be difficult in a situation because they really just want to be on the opposite side of the other one. But you are a partner in this. You both own it. You probably both have to liquidate the house. So you both have the same goals in mind. Try to maybe remove some of the emotion and move forward knowing that, you know, this is just one last thing we're going to have to partner on. We're going to have to make some good decisions for us and, you know, work together on it. That's probably the best piece of advice I could get people. Getting a divorce if you're in the middle of selling your house is you are on the same team for this one.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I tried to strike her out with that one. It was like the change up curveball. And no, but I think I honestly, Shannon, I think that's wonderful advice is that a lot of people may try to use it as a tool to get back because there's an emotional component that's obviously going on with most divorces. And this is not the time or place for that, right? Because you have to liquidate this asset. So understanding that you're still on the same team, even for this last chapter, is important. It's the only
way you're going to get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. Aspen, can you add to some thoughts there in regard to working amiably with each other through the process of divorce when selling a property?
Yeah, I have had a few where they've gotten divorced way before. I actually had one where they got divorced 2 days before closing and didn't tell anybody. That was an exciting one.
Wow.
But they were actually really good friends and we're just going their separate ways in life. So that one was actually one of the easier ones. Yeah. But I would say, like what Shannon said, this is not the time to stick it to the other person and just know we're representing both of you. Mm-hmm. There could be two realtors working on it together at the same time, but like we can't keep secrets from each other. We can't negotiate without the other person. We can't just do things without the other person. This really has to be like a business relationship and we have to get through it. And the goal is to get you both as much money as you can if you're selling. So just put aside your differences for now. You don't have to communicate with each other. You can communicate through us, but you do have to kind of agree. Mm-hmm. And you all have to agree in the contract. We can't do something without the other person.
And that's a great point that they could communicate through us because a lot of times they feel like they're going to have to sit down and talk about things together. If we have conversations, we can have conversations separately with both of them and come to usually a mutual decision between the two of them.
It really does. It's like how you negotiate with a buyer and a seller. It's kind of the same thing. So now we're negotiating buyer to seller, but also between seller and seller. Mm-hmm. So it does add an extra layer of, complication to it, but we can do it and we can do it with getting along without being ugly towards each other.
Yeah. I mean, great back and forth there, because oftentimes that becomes the tension, right? Between you're negotiating with the other side, but then you're also having to negotiate between the sellers themselves. Mm-hmm. And we take a firm stance on, like, we're going to be transparent. We're trying to do this together. I'm Switzerland. I'm not taking sides, right? We're not going to jump on one side or the other or lean one way or the other, but we're going to try to facilitate this contract so we can get to the finish line. We can close this chapter for you and move on. In fact, recently, Paul, you actually closed a deal with me. There was a situation that was similar to that. It actually worked out really well, and it was a successful transaction. It was a successful closing, and you handled that very well. You navigated those waters. But what was probably the biggest tension point that you had with those sellers, if any? Or just explain about that process a little bit, or how you approached it without going into details. Okay. I mean, we don't need to go into any specifics, obviously.
Well, we need one specific. Which deal was this?
Yeah.
Honestly, I can't remember.
There was a cash buyer that came down from Durango, and we ended up getting a container.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes,
bringing that one up.
Yeah, okay. Holy moly.
I still owe you money on that one.
Are you awake on that one?
I blocked that one out.
It couldn't have been that bad.
Yeah.
One thing I'll say is, if you are sellers that are getting a divorce, please take it easy on us, because we are, it gives me flashbacks to when my parents divorced when I was a kid. We're Switzerland most of the times, but usually when we're negotiating between two divorcing people, one person's sane, the other person's not. That seems to be what's going on.
Is that what happens?
And that's what happened in this situation. I was dealing with somebody that you could see why the other person was divorcing me. I'll just say that. Not to get too into details, and we get thrown into the middle of this. We're just trying to help. Yeah. This is our job. We don't have to be in all the intimate details of your arguments or the reasons that you're divorcing. Sometimes you get brought in, but for that specific one that we're talking about, my job was to keep one calm and to work with the other one to get things done and relay to you that everything was fine.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it worked. So when you had a request, it got brought over there. Chaos ensued. I figured something out between numerous conversations, because that's the other thing that people don't think about. We have to have a full conversation with one side and calm them down, bring them up, whatever it is, get some sort of an answer, then bring their answer over to the other party, have them react to that answer, Yeah. Because when people say that they're divorcing, but it's amicable, it's not.
It's almost never.
It's not amicable.
I mean, you had a situation, obviously. It was the
most strange.
Yeah.
It was like so unexpected. They walked into closing. They were like, oh, we got divorced. And I was like, oh, they're like, we have all of our divorce decree. And he was going to, they were like retiring, and he was going to go do his thing, and she was going to go do hers. And they were leaving as friends. And
wow.
Luckily. And the only problem with that was because we didn't know beforehand, title has to know where's the check going, and it has to match what's on the contract. So there was a little bit of issue with that because she had changed her name, and luckily they both were like, we'll just put in his, and he's like, I'll just split it half. And they were totally fine with it. It made me a little bit nervous, but as far as I know, that's what happened, and everything was fine. Yeah.
And you have some legal paperwork that you have to deal with. I mean, there's a divorce decree that happens, and that stipulates, who owns what, and there's some direction there and some guidance. Now, divorce decrees aren't always black and white. There's some leeway in those, and it's open to interpretation. So you're just hoping that people, when they are going through that, they're amiable with their understanding of how that plays out. But I'm going to shift gears a little bit and say, what about a situation where they may have gotten married?
Oh, I just had that a few deals ago.
Just before because we've had this. Yeah. So let's talk about that, Aspen. If you're planning on getting married, maybe don't get married right before closing, because that can throw a wrench in it. Talk a little bit about your experience there.
Yeah. So I had someone who was selling their house, and I did know that they were probably going to be getting married while he was selling his house. And I let them know, hey, if you get married, you do need to let me know. And I think people don't want to share. They're like, that's private. Why would I need to tell you? But we're a community property state. So we do need to know, and we need to know how the funds are being transferred. And we need to, have a
sole and separate
agreement in place, or we need to add your new spouse to the contract. Mm-hmm. So it's things that we can do pretty easily, but it does take time. So they let me know, and then we were able to go one way or the other for them and it was fine. But if that was sprung on us right before closing, it might be a little bit more of an issue. But luckily we knew beforehand, about a week before closing.
And something interesting about that is because that was a seller, you think about if that was a buyer, that changes everything with your loan.
Yep.
If you're getting a loan as a single person and now you're married, that's going to have to be underwritten again. Your lender's going to have to know about that. On the flip side of it, it was just the seller, but there may not have been a loan, but you still have to go through the title insurance process again, because now you have a whole nother person involved that has ownership to that property.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think people sometimes don't realize that. This isn't about us just getting in their business or trying to figure out what they're doing. It's really making sure that all the boxes are checked and everything's taken care of. And we can't just find out that stuff at the closing table. We have to be a little nosy. We have to know your business.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize that title insurance isn't just on the property and the history of the property. It's also, they do a search on the buyer. They do a search on the seller to make sure there's no outstanding tax liens or anything else that are out there. So if you're buying a property, just understand that if you get married before you buy, that your new spouse will have to go through the title insurance process as well and the research on them to make sure there's no outstanding tax liens or whatever else, or you have to exclude them from the contract altogether. So there are some ins and outs, and people just don't think about that. And like to your point, they just think, oh, we're being nosy. No, this is just part of the business that has to happen to convey legal title and make sure that there's no clouds or anything like that.
I do tell people too, if you're getting married, if you're getting divorced, I will not share that information. That's not information that I need to share with other people. It will stay with me, but I do need to know. Yeah. Otherwise, we're going to run into a speed bump. So I let people know that that's not something that's going to be told to the world. So I think that makes people a little bit more comfortable sharing it as well, because that's not something we have to discuss with everybody, but we're going to have to tell the title company at least.
Sure.
We're going to have to make sure the contracts reflect that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and at the Lyons Group, we don't shy away from difficult topics. As you can tell, today's a difficult topic, but also we have deaths that happen. We have situations where people pass. I mean, it's one of those things that you have to be prepared for, especially when it comes to handling estates. I had a situation that happened where we were in the middle of a sale and the owner passed. And this is many years ago. Her new husband, they'd only been recently married, I think a year or so. He called me and said, she has passed. It was unexpected. And he was not part of the contract at that point. She had removed him from the contract, but he asked if that he could terminate the deal. And I said, you can't terminate the deal. There's some survivability there. And I did talk with the buyer, and the buyer actually said, you know what, at this point, I'm okay terminating the deal. But we had to go through that process. It wasn't like, hey, I get to step in and make this decision, because there are wills and trusts and things like that. And hopefully you have something set up. If you're listening to this podcast, get something set up to protect your family. If you were to pass, you need to have some direction in play.
You think about all the things that could have happened right there. What if the one that had passed maybe had some children? Maybe she had left that property, if she's had any property, to her children when she passed. Who knows how she had taken title with her new husband? Was he on the title? Did they never address that community property state? He would have some rights, but did she do a sole and separate and make sure he wasn't a part of that? Those are all things that we don't know offhand. That stuff takes some real time to figure out and sort out who actually has a right to that property.
Yep. And if the kids are saying, hey, I want this to sell to go through, we need the money to help cover funeral costs and whatever else.
Yeah, they may feel that it's theirs. A husband may feel that it's his. That's not really for us to work out. But those are all things that we have to have a lot of information about to know, even how to proceed with our contract.
Yeah, I'm having a deal right now where the wife never added the husband to her home. They were married for a long time, and then he has passed away, and now she's selling it, and they're still having to do probate, even though he was never added. It's actually almost worse that he wasn't added to the property, because now it's kind of up in the air on how it's going to be split, even though it really will still all go to her. And so she's having to do a lot of extra work, which is probably emotional work as well,
right,
to go through and get all of this done so she can sell the property. I think if you're not used to the community property state as well, like we are in New Mexico, people can be like, well, why do I have to do that? And they get a little bit confused on it.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have to be on the deed to have rights to a property.
Well, and I have an experience with that. We had a guy bought a home, then got married, then got divorced, then we tried to sell the home. She was never put on title. The title company was saying, but she paid a portion of the mortgage payments for a certain amount of time, so she has some interest in the property. So there was a big confusion whether he bought it by himself. She lived there for a certain amount of time. What rights did she have to the property? So yeah, community property estate, it can be a sticky subject.
Yeah, if you don't have a prenup or a postnup, then it's going to have a little bit of scrutiny with it.
Yeah, because they can attach pretty easily, but they don't sever as easily. So, getting married, you can inherit some rights to a property, but just getting divorced doesn't always necessarily mean you've separated your rights from the property now.
Yeah, that is a great point. And we have situations too where people go out and get a loan, right? And they're married and they do a sole and separate because maybe their spouse doesn't have good credit or it doesn't behoove them to be on the loan. So they do a sole and separate. And so they take title in their name, but they have a spouse and they want their spouse to be on title. So it's a reminder to go get your spouse back on title after closing. I think there's a waiting period now, 30 days or something, that the title company, and I don't know.
Or talk with a lawyer about whether, even if you don't want to do titles, talk to a lawyer about some estate planning of some sort of how you want that taken care of if anything were to happen.
Yeah.
There's several ways to make it happen, but you got to be thinking about it.
Yeah. It's money well spent up front, but it also it's kind of a living, breathing thing. Like you can't just forget about it forever. You got to go back in and adjust because life happens and things change. And, your intentions that were 10 years ago, maybe not match your intentions today, but it's good at least to have that in play. And we went through and did that personally just because we didn't want anyone dealing. If something happened to my wife and I, we would want it all spelled out and just to save heartache and headache for our family. And that's the right thing to do if you do own property to get that set up, get that in place for your family members if something were to happen to you.
That's the last thing they want to think about and deal with.
Yeah. And it's arduous. I mean, you go into, probate.
And expensive.
Yeah. It takes time. Yeah. So I know it's a little bit of a downer topic, but hey, we don't shy away from those things at the Den. We got to talk through this stuff and it's important to hear. I mean, it is a reality check when you go, oh yeah, that is going to happen. I mean, none of us get out of this life alive, right? So it's true. It's just part of what we have to deal with, but set your family up for ease. And if you are going through a divorce, be open with your realtor. If you're in the middle of a sale, have a conversation and be open and transparent about what the situation is and whether you and your spouse I've had situations where the exes couldn't even sit in the same room. They couldn't even have a conversation.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And so then you're juggling that component. So let's go jump into the speed round, get some thoughts here. Paul, I'm going to kick it off with you. What is the most important takeaway when dealing with a life event in real estate? I mean, what's the most important thing you should be thinking about or planning for with a major life event in real estate?
I think one of the things that we deal with in all of these topics we talked about, whether it's death, marriage, or
taxes,
divorce, taxes, emotions shouldn't factor in. It's hard to do that, but if you can keep the emotions out of it and just whatever you're dealing with real estate, the buyer or the seller does not care about the emotions that you're bringing in. So if you can separate those two just for, the business side of this deal, it'll be better for you.
It'll expedite the process. Yep. It'll
make it easier on the realtors, make it easier on the other side, make it easier on yourself. That would be my thing. Or like you say, plan this all out ahead of time because we come into some situations that people have made for themselves and you just go, I don't even know what to do here. You got to start calling up, and when the other
call someone more professional and adulter than me.
Yeah, and when they say, well, "I've never heard that one before," you go, "Oh God, we're in trouble."
Great answer, Paul. I love that. Aspen, take a couple minutes and give us your thoughts.
I think whenever it comes to divorce, I think you need to treat it like a business decision, and you need to be kind of particular about your realtor as well. You both have to agree. I have seen where the realtor is very much taking one side or another, and I don't think that's appropriate or the place to do it. So be particular about who you choose, put in a little time, and you guys do need to work together like it's a business decision. And that's hard to do whenever you can't get along and you're getting divorced for a reason, but we don't really care what that reason is. So, figure that out on the other side. We're not here to try and screw anyone over. We really want to try and make it amicable and easy for everybody. So we will do everything in our power to help with that. But, maybe like Paul said, take the emotion aside just a little bit and save it for another day. This isn't the time to do it, because if you hurt them, you're hurting yourself too. Mm-hmm. That would be my thing for divorce. Whenever it comes to, a life event like a death, if you are going to own any property, especially more than one, I think you need to speak with a lawyer and get a trust set up or something in place, because your family doesn't want to deal with it. And it really does make kind of a mess on the back end side if something's not in place and you think it should just be easy and it's just going to go to the next of kin or whatever. It's not like that in real life. So I would say you need to talk to a lawyer and get something set up.
Yeah. All great points.
It's not fun to talk about,
Yeah.
Me and my husband did it 2 years ago. We went and got everything set up, and it's kind of a morbid conversation to have, but it's a necessary conversation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It really is, especially with children involved and whatnot. I mean, you don't want to leave a mess for sure. So,
yeah.
Shannon, what are your thoughts?
I'd say transparency. That's the most important thing. If you're coming into a real estate transaction or you're in the middle of one and there's any major life event that's going on, I would say transparency is probably the most important thing. Just be honest. You may tell us something and we may say, okay, that's all right. We can deal with that. That's not going to affect this. That's the best case scenario, but please say something, because the sooner we know, the more we can shift gears behind the scenes, whether we have to add somebody to a contract, whether we have to go, start a different process, whether, we need to, amend some things to make those changes known. There are steps that are going to need to be taken. So I would say be as transparent as you can.
Be as transparent.
We can't help you unless we know what we're dealing with.
Know what we're dealing with. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I'll just round out the conversation with this. I want to take a piece from everybody. I mean, I think that removing the emotion component is big. I mean, I know it's hard to do. This is, especially going through a divorce, it's like a vacuum of emotions. And that's really hard, but ultimately we're trying to get to the finish line. We're trying to close this chapter and allow you to move on. So focus on the end, focus on, the freedom that you'll have once this asset is liquidated and there's the finish line. And then also planning ahead is big, especially, with your children. So if a life event happened and something were to happen to you, then have a plan in place. That is the right, the thoughtful thing to do for your family and the ones that are left behind. And then finally, the transparency component, be forthright and upfront in all your dealings, especially if you're going through a divorce, because it's not a time to twist someone's arm or give them a pinch over something that can derail a transaction when you're almost to the finish line. It's just not appropriate. That's not an appropriate platform. There's clearly issues that need to be resolved there or walked away from, but that's not the mechanism to do that. So I agree with all of those things. Again, here at the Lyons Group, we don't shy away from tough topics. This is a tough one, and it may hit home for a lot of people. And if you've gone through this, my heart goes out to you. I don't wish that on anybody. There's always a silver lining. There's always a chapter ahead, and focus on that. On a lighter note, all right, let's wrap that. On a lighter note, we're going to move into my favorite part of the podcast, which is the Lyons Pride. And on the episodes that we have the time, we like to take and highlight a person, an event, an organization that does wonderful things in the community, because as members of the Lyons Group, we do put it out there on the line. We try to make our community better. We donate, we give time, we roll our sleeves up because we want to make this community we live in the best it can be. And today I want to highlight the Downtown Association. I think they have done a wonderful job here in Farmington. Our downtown is looking fantastic. If you drive downtown, you see all the flags going. They took a lot of heat redeveloping the downtown. I mean, and through that process was a little arduous. I mean, it's construction, and a lot of businesses really had to just kind of hang in there, because they weren't getting the foot traffic and whatnot. But now it's fantastic. We're starting to get really a vibrant downtown, and I'm super excited for that because this little community comes out and supports. And we just had the Connie Mack Parade. By the time you're watching this will be several weeks after the Connie Mack World Series. But I got to give it to our community. And this Downtown Association has really made it possible to make that parade something special. We are hosting boys right now for the Connie Mack, and they just remarked over and over again how special it was to do that parade and walk through and see those kids and see the smiling faces and all the community come out and support. But that wouldn't have been possible. I mean, it was possible, but it wouldn't be possible to the level it is today if that downtown hadn't been redone. And I know that took a lot of effort, a lot of planning, a lot of input from the community. So I just wanted to highlight the city of Farmington and that association that really put that together, that task force that put that together. So thank you.
Very nice.
The Lyons Group, we see you. We want to thank you for that. And cheers to many years to come for great things in our downtown. So if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can go to our Facebook, the Lyons Group. You can go to sjcbroker.com, get more information about who we are as the Lyons Group. You can reach out to any one of us, schedule a personal consultation. And we would love to hear from you. Any feedback is appreciated. We love talking points. We love engaging with our viewers and our customers and clients. So we appreciate you listening to this episode of The Den, and until next time, we'll see you then. Thank you for listening to The Den, powered by the Lyons Group. Hit the subscribe button to keep informed on real estate happenings. If you'd like to learn more about the Lyons Group, visit sjcbroker.com. Complex markets require complex strategies. The Lyons Group can give you a true advantage in any market. Whether you're buying or selling, residential or commercial, contact us directly at sjcbroker.com. We're time-tested experts with a client-first approach, and we'll see you next time in The Den.